So I've made a few changes to the overall design, just getting things a bit easier. So one thing that I've changed for the database is I've added auto increment to the primary key, so we don't have to specify one when we do it. Then I've gradually started generating some unit tests, as you can see here, and some code to go with it. So I'm just going to talk through some of these basic functions. So what I've got here, I've created a folder called ClutterBase core, and that's a Python module here. I've got two files in here, so connection.py and functions.py. I'm most probably going to refactor and change a few of these as we go along, but to start with, this will work. And I've got a folder called tests, and you can see there's test database connect here, which is my unit test, which I'm using as part of the test-driven development process. So the first one here, and I've generated this as a free function because basically this is going to be called every so often when you want to create a new sort of database. So it makes sense for this to be a function. And what it does is it creates an SQL3 connection based on the file name passed in. You'll notice I'm using context manager here and also an outer try except blocked, so we can make sure things work. And then this is the SQL query that's generated to basically create the table. So it says here, create table, if not exists, ClutterBase, that will go off, generate all of the different elements in there. Then we get a cursor to the connection. This is basically how we interact with the database. We get a cursor, which is a pointer into the database. Then we execute an SQL command, in this case, the command here. And there's a simple unit test to test this here. So I'm using standard Python unit tests. A couple of class methods here, setup class and teardown class. What this does is it's called once when the unit tests run. In this case, I'm just creating a temporary directory. For testing, I basically want to write stuff to a temporary directory and then delete it at the end. So this manages all of that itself, makes it a bit easier. There are some cases where I'm actually creating also just local ones for testing as and when I'm doing it. But once these are in production, all that test data can just disappear once we're finished with it. So I'm creating the test DB here. So you can see I'm writing a unit test to just see if I can create it. That should return true if it's successful. And here's one trying to write into a folder I don't have permission. That should return false. I have actually got another database here. You can see this one called connect test here. So what I can do is I can also connect SQLite 3, connect test. We can go .tables to show the tables in there, so you can see I've created one there, and .schema, which you can see shows the schema, so that's the table it's in there. So that's all working quite nicely there. What I've now done is I've created a class called ClutterBase connection, and basically what this will do is it will hold a permanent connection to a database on a file. So we construct it, we just pass in the name, then when we call open it will try and connect to that. If not, it'll throw an exception. There's a close method to close that connection. You'll also notice there's this enter and exit method. Now these allow us to use context managers in Python, which is a form of RAII, resource acquisition is instantiation. So we can use the with clause to enter, open the connection, and exit, close the connection. There's a method called load blob here, which will basically, notice a leading underscore to try and make that private. What that's going to do is just open a file as a binary. And then a method at the moment just called add item, which is going to add an item into the database. And you can see here's my basic query. Insert into ClutterBase, name, description, mesh data, top image, persp image, side image, front image, values, question mark here. And all of these values are basically the blobs here. We then create a tuple for the query data. So load these in. These are just binary lumps of data. Put them all into the query data. Then we execute the query, and the data that gets passed in, that gets committed to the database, so it should get inserted to the database, and then we close that query. And running the tests, so just do a PyTest there, it goes through, runs those tests there. What we should be able to now do, you can see the connection test is still there, score light, connect test DB, select star from ClutterBase. And you can see there's some data there, and in fact that's the OBJ file that I've loaded in. You can see that looks like an OBJ file, so that's quite useful. What I can say is if I say select name from ClutterBase, you can see there's something called whisk in there. In fact, there's two objects in there now because I've inserted it twice and it does an auto load. What we'll also see if we look at the ClutterBase here, we can actually look at the structure of it. Now, if I go into the data now, what we can see is total rows 1. So here's whisk, a whisk. You can see the mesh data here. And you can also see the images have been saved. They're PNGs and they're loaded in there as blobs. So I can put data into the database now. What I'm going to do now is write a simple tool that allows me to quickly enter a load of data in. We can build up a nice database, and then we can start writing a GUI front end for it and some tools that will go into Maya and the other tools as well. So I've committed all of this in GitHub, so it's all ready to go. I'm just going to refresh the database because it should hopefully see that there are 2 rows in there now. Are there 2 rows in there? No, just 1 row. So it hasn't quite updated that, never mind. So yeah, so we're going to carry on there, write some more tools with this, and continue with all the code. So you should be able to see all of this on GitHub.